Business School on their digital disruption program, and working quite extensively with clients in the Middle East in particular, and a lot of this public sector around transformation, and of course, generative AI playing an increasingly important role. So looking forward to our session today. We'll start off with some tech news, and then we'll move into an area around adoption, some of the areas that we need to focus on, speed of adoption, and the way that we bring generative AI in. That's our conversation today. Michael, let me start over with you on tech news, please.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, before I do that, I invite you, if you have questions you want to ask us, this QR code just on my head, above my head. This leads you to our BTO WhatsApp group. And this is the way how to directly reach out straight here on this phone, which I have in my hand. So you can ask any questions there and interact with us. So back to tech news. There's actually quite a bit happening as always, and some interesting stuff. And I'll explain briefly also why that matters. So one thing is Anthropic came up with a new version just recently, 4.0. Now they basically published 4.1, so just a small jump. The results look actually quite promising. Yeah, so the first benchmarks. So it's interesting why they publish quickly a version. Of course, that's related to what OpenAI is doing. They announced that 5 is coming out with a quantum leap. So and this is expected anytime this summer, so the Northern Hemisphere summer. But OpenAI did something interesting. They published the OSS version, and this is actually an open source version, which is a complete switch to their approach so far, which was black box. Now it's kind of an open source model. Why? Because they feel the pressure in the market. And to put that into perspective, clearly most of us use ChatGPT, Claude, and the likes for our so-called personal productivity on a personal level. But of course, the big gains and opportunities, which we all discuss and see, is on the process level, changing processes. So that's on the enterprise applications. And there's something interesting happening that actually Anthropic is winning more and more market share and now has a bigger market share than OpenAI in this enterprise market on foundational LLM. So this is the context. So there's a real market share fight going on. That's why these advancements of the LLM still matter, though you might say, doesn't really matter which one I use, they're all so good and I get so much value out of it. That's true too, but in a corporate perspective, that is different. So that's kind of the tech news and linking it why that matters from a perspective. So then I think that's a perfect continuation with one of the topics, because we are staying in this corporate environment with our discussion, Markus, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we wanted to share with you today are a couple of our insights we're having with our clients around the world, in particular in Asia Pacific, the Middle East, and Europe, about where is Gen AI actually prone to be really, really successful? Where can you succeed fast by applying some elements of generative AI? And where are areas a little bit slower? Just to give you the confidence where you could actually look in your own organization and to avoid your burning yourself in something where we could have advised you already, don't go there because it's really, really slow. If I ask you, Rob, one area where it's fast, where would you point at?
Well, I'd point at areas where we're seeing a significant amount of language being used in existing solutions. So the obvious one is marketing, and we're seeing that everything from customer acquisition and going out and targeting with the right message to the right audience. Once we have customers on board, we need to be developing highly targeted content, and the content is text-based. But of course, more and more we're seeing the agencies under pretty serious pressure here, because they're seeing that well configured Gen AI tools are creating at a fraction of the price and cost great content which can be A/B tested. So marketing is a really obvious area. We're seeing significant improvements, and indeed that's translating into some pretty significant efficiencies and indeed cost savings there. Sales and the ability to get out there with the right message in terms of customer service and customer experience, which then leads us into product, an area again where we can capture real-time feedback from our customers and well-designed feedback loops and building that into the product roadmap. And then there are the areas around heavy text analysis. If we're looking at procurement and you're in the procurement area, you want to be comparing the merits of two potential suppliers. That can be done at a fraction of the time and cost. And then legal and all that encompasses whether we're looking at our employment processes and dealing with contracts with our partners. So heavy text-based solutions is where we're seeing most traction, which raises the question, where are we seeing there's less speed of adoption, and why would that be the case? So Michael, where would you see the barriers here in adoption, and what's the reasoning for that?
Yeah, I think you mentioned quite a few great examples. Everything text heavy leans, of course, towards the support. Still not easy, and still there's still a huge gap in terms of, for example, the number of digital agencies, marketing agencies, especially in the marketing, and on the other hand, the AI agencies. So there's a huge opportunity. When it comes to slower development, there's certainly a number of areas which have significant human involvement in terms of their thinking and their level of creativity. So kind of decision making in difficult situations is an example. You have when it comes to kind of interacting, of course, we need a lot of empathy and collaboration skills. This is an interesting area. So where you have the people-to-people component coming in, this is where it becomes it's even more important that you actually develop those skills because they in those areas you can use the GenAI solutions to support you to some extent. Though where in some of the areas you mentioned, it's actually a lot more than support. It really takes out big chunks of the work. So it's kind of, yes, that means that the work can shift of the people there to more value add work. But also at the same time, of course, there's a reduction of headcount in some areas. Clearly, that can't be debated away. But it's different. It's not that simple. It's just not only about that. Where in some other areas, it's much more about kind of human-to-human interaction, collaboration. How do you lead? I mean, how do you lead a human in this environment? This is a huge area, which I think kind of, and I see Markus nodding, which really leans kind of towards something else than just doing an LLM.
Yeah, which leads us great answers. We talked about the fast one and the maybe at first a little bit slower ones. By the way, slow doesn't mean they are not doing it. It means they're a little bit more careful maybe and more detailed in their application. And then there's a large spectrum of medium speed, let's call it this way. HR, for example, I just had a seminar yesterday where HR was quite reserved towards a GenAI. He said, no, we are in the human-to-human relationship business. GenAI, we don't trust so much. And at the end of our seminar, they realized that GenAI can, like Michael just highlighted, take out huge chunks of really administrative and repetitive jobs, and you can actually use the time to have a conversation with a client, a candidate, a colleague, or a leadership development. So there are solutions, by the way. If you are interested, reach out to us. We know a couple of players in this field who actually are very, very pioneering in the field of candidate search and selection with the help of GenAI, where within minutes, literally, you can turn a job description for any role into a simulation, and that leads then for candidates to play it. Other areas are manufacturing. Manufacturing is typically engineering minded, very, very careful, but at the same time, Michael and Rob, they are very, very open to new technologies and innovation because that's in their DNA. So manufacturing as well yesterday in my seminar said we need to talk because we had our Maverick simulation and they said we would like to roll that out in our manufacturing community. And then there are other areas. We talked about legal, for example, they are much faster, and there are other areas you can actually introduce the change management, which Michael just highlighted. Which leads me to a second question we wanted to discuss for you today, and that is Agile versus Waterfall project management and transformation management. I turn to Rob first. He's a professor for Agile. Make your case why Agile and generative AI is the best combination or not.
Yeah, it's a trend we've seen for the last few years, and in any digital transformation, typically we need to bring together individuals, subject matter experts from different parts of the organization and get them working together. So let's say we're developing a new app and we need to bring in the customer perspective. What's the customer looking for? What are their unmet needs? We need to bring together the product team if they're going to be developing this app. And then we need to be looking at customer experience. We need to look at, we need to have the thing funded. We need to look at project management. And typically the project management will bring these different stakeholders together and they'll be developing their solution. So the case for Agile is pretty strong. And we would think that with so much speed of change and needing to iterate, create different versions of the solution, have our retrospective to see what's working and what's not working, and then bring in more people or less people for each stage, for each sprint as we go through the Agile process, it would seem obvious that this is the right way to go.
Okay, I'll stop you here, Rob. I want to go to our ambassador of Waterfall. Michael, you have run projects for the most of time of your life. Make your case for Waterfall, please, and GenAI.
Thank you. I like that debate style. And of course, Agile clearly has its benefits. But there's an interesting aspect. So when you think about agentic solutions, yeah, and this is what we teach. I have a session with a group of Indian executives who do some international business here, also in Portugal. And a 4-hour session in I think 2 weeks' time, and we'll cover that one as well. And so what we talk about is the fact that agentic solutions, there are two components. One is more the agentic approach, the kind of more flexible approach, if you like. But the predominant version at the moment are workflows, agentic workflows. And workflows, per definition, are very strict. Yeah, so they are predefined. And it's actually really step by step. There is some flexibility, of course, in, let's say, for example, the content creation. But the steps that follow each other, they are predetermined. Yeah, so there is not like, well, we're doing now this and then we'll do something else. Yeah, so it's a clear, predefined path forward. There is no fluidity, if you like. There's no flexibility in there. So that, of course, then requires a similar approach, like more the Waterfall approach. You clearly define all the specs. Yeah, so the definition of specs, which used to be super important, when I was running the kind of large SAP and Oracle projects, super important. In Agile, this has changed. It's not chaotic, but it's a different approach, more iterative. Where here, iteration can be a challenge because you need to define what you need and what you want, and then put that into an agentic workflow. So I think the judge is not out there. We just want to, I think, use this opportunity, Markus, I want to kind of make that case. Yeah, so there is a case for going back to Waterfall and a more structured approach as well.
I think the reason why we wanted to share this kind of mini debate with you is we sense this in a lot of organizations we are dealing with. We find people who are incredibly frustrated about Agile and or Waterfall. And now Gen AI comes in and people are asking, amongst many other things, it's not only technology, it's what is the process of transformation and how do we actually drive people towards a better world and future with Gen AI. So we leave it here, hopefully with an open end for your questions. Don't forget, there's a QR code hanging above Michael's head here. You can join our WhatsApp community here. There is no sales and no marketing happening there. Don't worry, we will not reach out to you in an undisciplined way. It's very waterfall-like, Michael. And we will be back next week. If you have any questions or topics you would like to discuss let's reach out to us through this QR code. With that, have a great end of the week and see you next week again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.